When Anatoly Cherdenko and a couple of his comrades traveled back to the past in order to eliminate Albert Einstein and change the present, they did so without fully understanding the consequences of their actions. On one hand, eliminating Einstein meant that the Soviet Union was winning their war against the Allies, whereas previously they were on the verge of defeat. On the other hand, their meddling in the space-time continuum meant that a new power had risen up to challenge both the Allies and Soviet Union. This new power was the Empire of the Rising Sun, whose military yielded some of the most unique and advanced weapon systems the world had ever seen, the most formidable of which were the Empire's Battle Walkers. The first of these mechas wasn't strictly a walker, but a hybrid called the Striker VX.
VX, all systems green.
Built from the Mecha Bay, the Striker VX was a two-legged walker that could transform itself into an attack chopper. The Striker is always built in its walker form, where it closely resembles a bird, thanks to the chopper blades being swept to the back of the vehicle, as well as the way it walks on the ground. Above the cockpit, where the pilot sits, is the Striker's weapon, which is a pod of rockets that can lock onto any aircraft, bringing them crashing to the ground. The Striker was the Empire's only land-based mobile anti-air vehicle. When upgraded with advanced rocket pods, the Striker could quickly take out entire squadrons of aircraft with ease. Unlike other Imperial ground units, the Striker wasn't strong enough to crush enemy vehicles, let alone infantry. On the flip side, the Striker could switch to chopper mode, where it could use its rockets against any ground units or structures. When switching from ground to flight, the rocket pods moved to below the cockpit of the VX. While the chopper could take on ground forces, it forfeited its ability to engage aircraft. If encountering enemy aircraft, the VX could swiftly switch to Striker mode to engage them from the ground. This transformation could only be done while over land, as the Striker had no aquatic capabilities. One of the more notable uses of the Striker VX occurred during the Empire's initial assaults against the Soviet Union. The Emperor resolved to destroy the city of Odessa, as he believed its destruction would crush the morale of the Soviet people. The city was also the headquarters of General Krukov, and its destruction would cripple the Soviets' military. Crown Prince Tatsu thought this was the perfect opportunity to unleash a new weapon against the Soviets, though it had to be assembled at a warehouse near the city. The transports that carried the components of this new weapon system up a river were protected by a squadron of chopper VXs. The choppers destroyed Soviet naval units attempting to sink the transports. As the weapon was being assembled at the warehouse, the chopper VXs switched to Striker mode to protect the building from air assaults. Once complete, the weapon that emerged from the warehouse was the Shogun Executioner, the most powerful battle walker ever created.
Commander, this is our newest weapon, the Shogun Executioner, and you will use it to crush the General's remaining forces.
The Shogun Executioner was a giant, autonomous, three-bodied battle walker. There was one leg for each of the three torsos on the walker. Due to its size, the Executioner could walk through shallow water. On land, the Executioner's legs could crush units and buildings. The walker was even able to smash through bridges with ease. Each torso of the Shogun was armed with an energy sword that could instantly destroy any unit struck by it. When swung, the sword sent out an energy wave that would also strike other units in its way, damaging or destroying them along with the primary target. The swords weren't effective against aircraft, so the only way the Executioner could bring them down was to literally walk into them, knocking them out of the sky with its body. The walkers' heads do have missile pods as ears, and one would think that these would act as its anti-air weapons, but unfortunately, they have no in-game functionality. The Shogun Executioner had a devastating ability called Omega Shockwave. When ordered to use it, the Executioner stops walking and uses all three of its energy sources to thrust downward into the ground, causing a wide electrical shockwave that destroys any units or structures around the walker. One unique capability of the Shogun Executioner was that it could use the Soviets' own Tesla weapons to repair itself. This was essential for the Executioner to complete its mission of destroying Odessa and the Soviet military forces spread throughout the city. Without this capability, the Soviet Union would have been able to halt the Executioner's rampage, and perhaps save the city. The electricity absorbed by the Tesla weapons perhaps also charges the Executioner's Omega Shockwave ability. Besides just generally demolishing the city of Odessa, the Shogun Executioner had to destroy 4 large Ukrainian artillery emplacements placed within the city. These guns were the Executioner's primary threat, and so focused on eliminating them. The Executioner also destroyed any historical landmarks it came across in the city, as a way of lowering Soviet morale. Once all the artillery cannons were destroyed, the unnamed Imperial commander ordered the Shogun Executioner to focus on destroying General Krukov's headquarters, the last bastion of Soviet resistance in the city. Supported by General Kenji's own Imperial forces, the Shogun Executioner broke through Krukov's defenses, destroying the general's headquarters and the surrounding military infrastructure. Odessa would not be the only time the Empire utilized the Shogun Executioner against the Soviet Union. To defeat the Union once and for all, the Empire sent the Executioner to Moscow, carving a path of destruction on its way there. An unnamed Imperial commander, along with his co-commander Kenji, arrived ahead of the Executioner to establish a foothold in the city. The Shogun Executioner arrived in Moscow by way of the Moskva River. As with Odessa, the Shogun Executioner went about destroying the Soviet defenders. The Executioner made its way toward the Kremlin and brought the iconic structure crumbling down. Doing so enabled the Empire to discover a bunker beneath the Kremlin, where the Soviets' time machine was kept. A twin blade attempted to fly the time machine out of the city, but it was shot down, thereby preventing Premier Cherdenko from using it to alter time again in an attempt to destroy the Empire of the Rising Sun. As a quick side note, while the Mecha Tengu does have arms and legs, it never actually uses its legs to physically walk on the ground. Instead, it hovers just above the surface of land or water while in Tengu mode. Because of this, I don't consider it to be a proper battle walker, and so won't be covering it in this video. While the Shogun Executioner may have been the most powerful battle walker in the Imperial arsenal, it was the only one of its kind. But the Empire had a smaller, though still formidable battle walker that was feared by the Soviets and allies, called the King Oni.
Who has awakened me?
Named after the demonic creatures in Japanese folklore, the King Oni was believed to be manufactured by Kurikara Robotics. It remains unknown why the Japanese military was compelled to design such an unorthodox fighting machine as this humanoid-shaped construct, which stands approximately 6 stories tall and evokes images of a mechanical, hulking ogre. However, the battlefield performance reports of this vehicle are very sobering, and suggest that its bizarre form factor is not merely a play against enemy morale. Indeed, the King Oni's combat abilities alone are more than enough to dampen an opposing army's spirits. The eyes of this robot conceal energy weapons that can reduce a tank to molten ruin in seconds. And the King Oni is remarkably capable of fighting with its own body, using its massive arms and shoulders to crush anything that stands in its way. An early battlefield report involving the King Oni suggested that one of these robots, when faced with an entire tank platoon, simply charged the main battle tanks head-on. Their shots deflected off the King Oni's white armor, which must be some sort of new compound, even as it barreled into the tanks, simply crushing them underfoot as though they were children's playthings. We do not know if this is a piloted, remote-controlled, or autonomous vehicle, because one has yet to be recovered or disassembled. The only thing that seems obvious about the King Oni is its combat proficiency. Military strategists surmise that it is almost impossible for the Empire of the Rising Sun to have constructed more than a handful of these remarkable machines. In regards to whether the King Oni had a pilot, there were a couple of other King Oni models piloted by Commander Kenji and Emperor Yoshiro. This could imply that the standard King Onis were also piloted, or perhaps these greater Onis are specifically made to be so, leaving the standard King Onis autonomous. While the King Oni's radiant eye blasters were effective against ground units, they were unable to deal with aircraft. So while it would be tempting for Imperial commanders to send King Onis onto the battlefield on their own, lacking any sufficient anti-air for the battle walkers could prove to be a fatal mistake. If the King Oni was unable to use its primary weapon, or needed to cover ground quickly, the walker could perform a bull rush. This causes the King Oni to charge forward, crushing any infantrymen in its path. Any ground vehicle struck by the bull rush would be instantly destroyed, so long as those vehicles were smaller than the King Oni. Vehicles like the MCV, Apocalypse Tank, and Future Tank X1 wouldn't be destroyed by the rush. The Oni could only perform this maneuver every so often, leaving some to speculate that the walker depends on the replenishment of an internal energy supply in between rushes. As mentioned earlier, there are a couple of specially designed King Onis used by Emperor Yoshiro and Commander Kenji, both of which featured unique paint schemes and stronger armaments. During the Soviet campaign, the Soviets conducted an operation to assassinate the Emperor. This operation proved to be a difficult one for the leading unnamed Soviet commander and his co-commander Moskvin, as the Emperor was well protected by his own commanders and their forces. The two Soviet commanders were able to defeat the Imperial ones and directly targeted the Emperor's palace. As it came crumbling down, a greater King Oni with a red color scheme emerged, piloted by the Emperor himself. Unlike the standard King Onis, the greater one had rocket pods mounted on its shoulders that were used to shoot down Soviet aircraft. These were the same rockets used on the Empire's Sea-Wing naval unit. In addition, the greater King Oni had more resilient armor and had a stronger weapon system that could one-shot light and medium armored vehicles. Despite these upgrades, they were not enough to stop the Soviet forces, who destroyed the greater King Oni, killing the Emperor. Though the Allies had officially won the Third World War, they had to deal with uprisings ignited by the Empire's surviving commanders. One of these was Kenji Tenzai, whose forces were located in Osaka. An unnamed Allied commander was sent to Osaka with a task force to capture Kenji. After successfully destroying his headquarters, Kenji, inside his own unique King Oni, still resisted capture by activating one of the Allies' own tech inhibitors. So long as this inhibitor was active, the Allies couldn't capture Kenji, nor could they use their own armor or aircraft against him. Instead, the Allies called upon Tanya and a squad of cryo-legionnaires to destroy the tech inhibitor. After fighting their way through many Imperial warriors, the Allied troops went up against Kenji. Kenji's King Oni had the strength and power of a standard heroic veteran King Oni, while featuring its own black and orange color scheme. Tanya swiftly ran around Kenji's King Oni, destroying the tech inhibitor. With the device destroyed, the cryo-legionnaires moved in and froze the King Oni. Afterward, a chronosphere was activated, teleporting Kenji and his Oni to an Allied prison. After escaping her cryo prison at a detention camp located in Guam, the Empire's former psychic commando, Yuriko Omega, made her way back to Japan, infiltrating the Shiro Sanatorium, where she was originally trained. Yuriko's goal was to rescue her sister and take revenge against Dr. Shinji Shimada. While making her way through this research center, Yuriko stumbled upon a wing called the Oni Testing and Coronation Chambers. Yuriko fought many King Onis in this section of the sanatorium, which, judging by its name, is where newly created Onis went through testing and, assuming they passed, were crowned as kings, confirming them for reliable use in combat operations. The last battle walker in the Empire's arsenal was the Steel Ronin.
No one stands in my way.
Unlike the King Onis, which were developed before the Third World War, the Steel Ronin were developed afterward, as the Empire of the Rising Sun began to be pushed back by the Allies and Soviet Union. The warriors of the Empire of the Rising Sun are known for their devotion and fury, and when they crashed upon the shores of the Soviet Union, the world reeled in terror. Nevertheless, their emperor failed to accurately weigh the magnitude of his ambitious plan, and his army's incredible momentum eventually gave way. Yet this did not quell the zeal in the hearts of the Empire's fighting forces. As the hour grew dark for the Empire, a small percentage of Imperial warriors grew uncontrollably agitated, refusing orders to fall back and channeling unspeakable rage into their bloody work. The late Emperor Yoshiro had no tolerance for this, for he insisted on the strict observance of a strict and disciplined warrior code. Thus, punishment came swiftly, and rather uniquely, to those who brazenly disobeyed orders within the Rising Sun military ranks. The rank and file who refused or disobeyed orders simply were put to the sword. However, experienced veterans who cracked under pressure or otherwise exhibited unusually violent dispositions met a different fate. They were encased in fearsome-looking devil coat suits, which contain elaborate medical systems and biometric regulators designed to leave a man in a barely conscious vegetative state indefinitely. The accused would carry out life sentences in complete isolation, looming over significant Imperial landmarks like half-dead statues. As it turns out, this ritualistic punishment was built on an ulterior premise, which may begin to explain the elaborate and doubtlessly expensive process. The Devil Coat suits are all linked to the central command network of Tenchi Zaibatsu, the company born of the Rising Sun's two top military manufacturers. The leaders of this conglomerate could quite literally flip a switch to make each and every Devil Coat suit active, awakening the men encased inside. Indeed, the Devil Coats are not ceremonial at all. They are fully functioning assault suits, and the same systems used to keep the men inside in a fugue state can also augment their senses, making them quicker and more powerful than ever before. The Devil Coats were activated after the death of the Emperor Yoshiro, leading many to believe that Tenchi Zaibatsu conspired against the Emperor in the creation of these weapons. At any rate, only once the Devil Suits came alive did the men piloting them come to be known as the Steel Ronin. After all, these half-men had no masters, only an impulse to fight the Empire's enemies to the death. Now they threaten whatever fragile sense of peace has come to their nation. The Steel Ronin appears to be some sort of ornamental guardian, humanoid in shape, and bearing a fierce-looking glaive weapon measuring roughly 9 meters in length. Once activated, the true natures of both the glaive and its wielder quickly become apparent. The Steel Ronin's assault suit is a highly maneuverable, fully articulated, mechanical monstrosity. The human pilot inside is linked to a complex subdermal interface wired directly to the electric impulses coming from his brain, allowing the Steel Ronin to move and react at the speed of thought, faster even, because of the awareness-heightening properties of the subdermal UI. The Devil Suit itself has a one-to-one locomotion system, such that the pilot's thoughts and actions inside result in corresponding motions by the suit. Thus, pilots are able to make the suit walk or swing its powerful weapon using little more than instinct. As for the weapon, the glaive is powered by a localized wave force field that could split even the toughest molecular bonds, such as those found in allied battle tank armor, with little trouble. The Steel Ronin were formidable warriors, able to quickly traverse the battlefield in search of their foes. While most Imperial units only engaged in close quarters battle as a last resort, the Steel Ronin intentionally fought in close quarters with their enemy, using their wave force glaives. These glaives were highly effective against vehicles, slicing them apart. The Ronin could use their glaive to initiate a ranged attack called Power Wave. This is feasible thanks to the wave force glaive containing an energy reservoir that could be expelled when the weapon's shaft struck firmly enough against the ground. This sent a searing wave of energy coursing directly ahead of the Steel Ronin, damaging all in its path. The Steel Ronin wasn't quite big enough to crush units beneath its legs. In addition, the size of its wave force glaive made it ineffective at eliminating infantry units, but the glaive was strong enough to knock down enemy infantry, making them vulnerable to follow-up attacks by the Ronin or other friendly units nearby. Just like the larger King Onis, the Steel Ronins were vulnerable to air attacks, and so needed anti-air support. The most notable use of the Steel Ronin occurred after the Third World War. With the Empire's military being a shadow of its former self, the Soviet Union attempted to take advantage of the situation and invade Japan's home islands. The Soviet General Moskvin attempted to capture the Oki Islands, where Emperor Yoshiro's tomb was located. The tomb was protected by 4 Steel Ronin, all of whom needed to be awakened by an Imperial infantry unit. With these Ronin, along with captured Allied vehicles, the Empire was able to halt Moskvin's initial assault on the Emperor's tomb. However, Moskvin would not be deterred so easily and established a base off the coast of the Isles, resolving to eliminate the Imperial defenders and destroy the tomb. More sleeping steel Ronin were located at various locations throughout the islands, and the Imperial commander used more recruited infantry to awaken these Ronin to bolster his defenses. In the end, the Imperial commander built a strong navy and sank Moskvin's main base, and eliminated any surviving Soviet forces on the islands. The corporation known as Future Tech wanted to collect weapon systems from each of the three major powers and hired a commander to go across the world to accomplish this objective. The Future Tech commander fought many battles against Kenji Tenzai, acquiring many Imperial weapon systems from him, including their famous Battle Walkers. The Future Tech commander fought against Kenji on a remote island in the Philippines. Kenji was using the island to practice new tactics involving nanocores when he was interrupted by the Future Tech commander, who destroyed his base. With this success, the Future Tech commander acquired the blueprints to build Striker VXs. Kenji encountered the Future Tech commander again somewhere in central Japan. Here, Kenji was training some recently awakened Steel Ronin units, and upon noticing the Future Tech commander, sent these Ronin against the intruder. Unfortunately for Kenji, the Future Tech commander established formidable defenses at his base, and then went on the counteroffensive, destroying all three of Kenji's bases. In doing so, the Future Tech commander acquired vital information on the Steel Ronin, enabling the commander to create his own as part of his Imperial arsenal. The two commanders met yet again in northeastern China. This time, Kenji was training a few veteran King Onis. Kenji even had a greater King Oni that patrolled his base. Shortly after the Future Tech commander's arrival, Kenji sent his veteran King Onis against him. However, the King Onis first had to smash their way through several walls to reach the enemy's base. This gave the Future Tech commander ample time to set up defenses and destroy the King Onis. Kenji would attempt to build more and send them against the commander. The Future Tech commander built up his own forces and assaulted Kenji's base. The Greater King Oni did what it could to defend the base, but was ultimately destroyed, along with the rest of Kenji's forces. With this victory, the Future Tech commander acquired the schematics to create his own standard King Oni Battle Walkers. An important question that surfaced at the end of the Third World War was, whatever happened to the Shogun Executioner? It turns out, the giant monstrosity was found on a remote island in Thailand. This stormy island was thought to be deserted until Future Tech traced several transmissions on an old emergency broadcast channel set up by the Allies several decades ago. Little could be heard beyond static before the transmissions were abruptly cut off. Future Tech hired some locals to bring back eyewitness accounts, though their reports were too ridiculous to be believed. However, the Soviets and Allies tracked these locals and sent their own commanders Moskvin and Lydia to investigate. Future Tech ended up sending their own commander to clean up whatever mess was going on there. That mess was, of course, the Shogun Executioner, which patrolled around the island. The commanders of each faction had set up their bases atop hills on the outskirts of the island, away from the Executioner. The commanders had to time their attacks against each other carefully, or else they would run into the Executioner, who had no problem slicing any of the commander's forces apart. Though it took a while, the Future Tech commander eventually eliminated the Shogun Executioner, bringing its rogue reign of terror to an end. The commander would also eliminate Moskvin and Lydia's forces too. It remains unclear exactly why the Shogun Executioner came to this island, or how it did so without anyone noticing. Thanks to the leadership of Crown Prince Tatsu, the Empire was able to prevent the Soviets from capturing mainland Japan and its territorial islands. At the same time, the Empire was able to capture the Russian port of Vladivostok and push out Allied occupation forces. With these victories, the Empire of the Rising Sun is poised to rebuild itself into a formidable power once again, with Battle Walkers continuing to play an integral role in its military.